Before continuing on with this course, we should take a few minutes to discuss setting up an iOS device for development. So far we've been running the app in the iOS simulator, and this is a great tool that we'll use all of the time, but at some point we need to actually take our app and deploy it onto a real hardware device. And this is necessary so we can get a much better sense for how the app looks, feels, and performs. Before we can actually deploy to a device, we first need to go through a process called provisioning. And in order to provision a device, you must be part of a paid iOS developer program. So either the standard developer program for $99 a year, or the enterprise developer program for $299 a year. So if you haven't yet taken this step, you may want to come back to this video after you've done so. Assuming you've already taken this step, we can continue on with this discussion. Device provisioning used to be just a truly miserable process. There was a large number of manual steps involved, most of which at the time weren't particularly well documented, which often meant you would run into all kinds of problems and be left scratching your head trying to figure out how to resolve them. Luckily these days it's a much easier process and can largely be automated by Xcode. So I have an iPhone plugged into my computer that has not yet been provisioned. Up at the top of the screen where it currently says iPhone 5.1 Simulator, I'll select that and instead switch to Bob's iPhone. So this is the name of the device I currently have plugged into my computer. I'll click the Run button, and we can see immediately we have a build failure. I'll click this red exclamation mark to get some more details about the error. And it says code sign error, there are no valid certificate private key pairs in the default keychain. And essentially what this is telling me is that I'm not yet properly provisioned this device. So let's talk about how we resolve this issue. We'll begin by opening up what's called the organizer. You'll find a button for this up at the upper right hand corner of the screen. And the organizer is a subcomponent of Xcode that's used for a variety of purposes, but one of which is device management. So on the screen I'm seeing some general information about the device I've got plugged into my machine. If this is the first time you've plugged in your device, you probably won't see this information, and instead we'll see a single button that says Use for Development. Since I've run through that already, I'm not seeing that button, but instead I can get the same basic effect of setting this up by clicking the Add to Portal button. But before I actually do that, I want to talk through the steps involved in the provisioning process. We first need to add this device to the iOS provisioning portal, and this is a component of the iOS Dev Center. We then need to create and upload a certificate request, and this certificate will be used to sign our code so it can be deployed onto your device. The certificate request must be approved and then downloaded to your Mac and installed. We need to create what's called an app ID, and this is an identifier allowing a particular app to be installed on an iOS device. We then create a provisioning profile, and this profile ties your developer account, device, and certificates together. And then finally, you would download and install this provisioning profile onto your device. So quite a few manual steps involved, but as I mentioned earlier, Xcode can automate most of this for us. So I'll begin by clicking the Add to Portal button. And the first thing it's going to ask me is to sign in with my Apple ID. This is the Apple ID I use to create my iOS developer account. So I'll click the Login button. Now since my iOS credentials are tied to a variety of developer programs, I'm getting the secondary prompt. You may or may not see this. I'll select Tap Harmonic as my team. This will run a variety of processes in the background. Now at the end I'm getting this error, and this is simply because I've already registered this device on the provisioning portal. I can simply say OK. But at this point my iPhone should be properly configured. So I'll switch back to the Xcode screen and click the Run button once again. And this time you can see that the build error went away, and you can see it says running Hello iOS on Bob's iPhone. And if I look at my iPhone, I can see I've got the app running. Now if you run into any problems during this process, you can usually resolve these by going to the iOS provisioning portal. So I'll switch over to that. And from the main iOS Dev Center page, over on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a link that says iOS Provisioning Portal. And from here, you can check the certificates you have in place, any devices, any app IDs you've set up, and any provisioning profiles you currently have in place. So you may need to step through each section to find out if there's any problems with your various configuration. If you do run into any problems, you can always check this document called the iOS App Workflow Guide. This will be useful and provide you with a number of steps that you can walk through to get these issues resolved. So hopefully you should have a better understanding of device provisioning. Hopefully all went well and you're able to deploy it to your favorite iOS device.